Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with part 2 of my April wrap-up. I'm doing this in 3 parts, so I will link part 1 down below, and the next book that I finished in the month of April was The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaefer and Annie Barrows. This is a very well-known, very well-loved book that I finally got around to reading. This is historical fiction, and it is epistolary. I think mostly, or no, I think it's all epistolary, and we're following several different main characters. But kind of our main character is Juliet Ashton, and she is a writer, and she ends up exchanging letters with some people who live on the island of Guernsey, and that ends up getting her really interested in their lives and in their story. This is also set in the post-war period, so after World War II, and the book deals a lot with that and how technically the war is over, but obviously the things that happened and the things that people went through are not over. They're still affecting them, so this book deals a lot with that kind of grief and trauma. And she ends up like exchanging letters with these people on Guernsey who started something called the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. And she just gets really wrapped up in these stories and these people's lives. This book is also about the power and importance of storytelling and community, and this was like really, really beautiful. I'm gonna tell you guys right now that I gave this book 4.5 stars, but I'm like, maybe this is gonna be a 5 stars because like it was really, really beautiful, very emotional, very well written. I really loved Juliet as a character. I really liked all these characters really, and they felt like real people, and their relationships felt very real. I really enjoyed the humor in this book. Like I said, I really thought the themes were done beautifully. I also really like that some of my personal favorite writers are talked about. Like there are some passages about Shakespeare that were so lovely and heartfelt that like they almost brought tears to my eyes. Jane Austen is talked about here, and Bronte, who I think is the best Bronte and the most underappreciated. So there's a lot of like little things like that that just really spoke to me personally. And yeah, I just thought this was really beautifully done. I was very invested in these characters and their story. There were things that I should have expected, but somehow still like took me by surprise. This is just such a gripping story, but it's very, very quiet. Like I think this book is a great example of how the stories that really like catch hold of you are not always the ones that are very active, that are very obvious about it. So I gave this 4.5 stars, but like it might be a 5 stars. The only thing that kind of held me back when I finished it from like immediately giving it 5 is that there were a couple of aspects that I thought were that I really enjoyed, but I wanted a little more from them, or like a little more, I don't know. This is one of those books that like makes me wonder, it's like, it's almost like, did I give this a lower rating because I loved everything else so much, you know? It's like, so in comparison, even though those parts of the book were not unsatisfying, but compared to how much I loved the rest of it, it felt unsatisfying. I don't know if that makes sense, but this was fantastic. Next, I finished Gothel and the Maiden Prince by WWII. This is in the Villains Ever After series, which, as I've said, are like retellings focusing on villain characters from fairy tales and giving them a romance, and also like a redemption kind of story, or like a different take on the story that makes them not as much of a villain. And I really, really enjoyed this. This is an author that I've been meaning to read for a while, and so I'm glad that I did really enjoy the first thing I read from her. This is a very short novella, but I'm really impressed at the amount of like story and characterization and relationship development. This is a Rapunzel retelling, and we're following obviously Gothel as the lead, and their other character is named Lucian, and I loved him. Like I love him and Gothel, and I really enjoyed their relationship. So the setup for this is that Lucian ends up making a bargain with her, and he's just like trying to get to know her more, because he is convinced that she's not as evil as she's trying to convince him that she is. And because of this, they end up making something called a true bargain, which involves asking each other questions that they have to answer honestly, and there's like rules for it and everything, and it's backed up by magic. It's like a magic contract, and Lucian's magic is at stake here. And this was just so good. Like I really like the true bargain setup. Like the way to develop characters and a relationship through that was, I think, really clever. I thought the magic stuff was interesting. I thought this book did a really fantastic job through Gothel and through another character of showing the effects of trauma and abuse and how difficult it is to trust after that. Like I think that was done really, really well. I also, like I said, I loved Lucian. He is just like so like kind and sweet and funny and charming, and I just love him. I love his respect for women. Like he's just wonderful. I thought this really short story did a great job of balancing the plot and the characters and the romance. I think the ending was really satisfying, like the way everything came together. And I also, something else about Lucian that I appreciate is he is a persistent character that is not in a gross way. Because I think there's a lot of times where like especially male characters are written as like kind of refusing to take no for an answer in a way that is supposed to be romantic, and it's not. It's like really uncomfortable and kind of creepy. And Lucian wasn't like that. Like he was determined to get to know Gothel better, but he like didn't push himself on her. Like he was really, really great about like taking cues from people. So yeah, I just thought this was great. I gave Gothel and the Maiden Prince 4 stars. Then on Easter Sunday, I finished The Art of Lent, a painting a day from Ash Wednesday to Easter by Sister Wendy Beckett. And this is I obviously have been reading it throughout Lent and ended on Easter. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a painting every day of the Lenten season. And it's kind of like I guess you would call this a devotional. I don't know if that is what this is exactly. It's like to focus, to kind of like celebrate Lent. And I thought this was really good. Like if you were looking for something like this, I thought this was a really good one. I really liked the way, like the selection of paintings that Sister Wendy Beckett did here. Actually, I would say only between a quarter and a third of them were actually religious paintings, because a lot of them weren't. And I really liked the way that she chose them and like the way that she interpreted them for the most part. It was really interesting because sometimes I would look at the painting and I'd have some kind of like response or reaction. And then I would like read her interpretation and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Or sometimes I would look at it and I wasn't really sure why she had picked it. And then when she explained the connection, I was like, oh, that's really smart. So there's kind of a good like balance of that. And each week she like focuses on a different like theme or concept. So yeah, I thought this was really well done. As you might expect, there are some parts that I connected with more than others, or parts that I agreed with more than others, but overall I thought this was well done, and I gave The Art of Lent 4.5 stars. I don't know, maybe it's kind of funny to rate something like this, but that's what I did. Next, I finished I guess you would call this graphic novel, although there's a lot more text than most graphic novels have. That is I Know What I Am, The Life and Times of Artemisia Gentileschi by Gina Siciliano. This is as you can see, giant graphic novel about the life of Artemisia Gentileschi, who is one of my favorite historical figures and painters. And this was a present from my lovely friend Yvette from Book Cave. This was, I think, for my birthday a couple years ago. And I finally got around to reading it, and this was so interesting. So this book focuses a lot on like the context that Artemisia was growing up in, like in terms of like the politics and like culture and religion and like other painters of the time and everything, and history as well. And then it also, obviously the main focus is Artemisia herself, her life and her work. And this was like a really, really interesting experience. There were a lot of things I liked about it. I really liked the ballpoint like ink drawings. It was really cool to get to see like some of these famous paintings by Artemisia and others done this way. Let me see if I can find one. So like Susanna and the Elders, and like some of the imagery was just so good, like so effective and so well done. Like Artemisia lost almost all of her children when they were very young, and the way that grief is shown, like this kind of like angel of death figures are just, well, as you can see, they're very, I think, effective and very evocative. So I thought some parts of that were really well done. I also really liked that Siciliano used so many direct quotes from Artemisia, like from her writings and from like other people's work and everything. And she puts those in lowercase writing so that you can tell what things are direct quotes and what things aren't, which I appreciated. I think this book also gave me a greater appreciation for Orazio Gentileschi, her father, like both as a person or figure and also as an artist. Like I think, yeah, I appreciated him more after reading this. And I also really admire the way Siciliano like engaged with the topics that she talks about, like, or with some of them at least, because I think he does a really great job of refuting this kind of idea that people in the past did not hurt the way we did, the way that people in our time do. Like when she's talking about things like assault, or like grief, like of losing like loved ones and things like that. Like I think she did a really good job of showing how like, yes, cultural context can affect how you view these things, but like she even shows examples from people's writings of those time periods, that it's like, it's not like it's only in the 21st century that people have been hurt by things, you know? So I thought that was done really well too. So a lot of great stuff here. I'm very glad that I read it and to have this in my Artemisia collection. There were some things though that I wasn't as much a fan of, like I think, so I mentioned like I really like that she differentiated the quotations from the stuff that is not quoted, but I kind of feel like that gave a sense of more historical accuracy than this book should have had. Maybe that's just like me, but I feel like when you are so clear about dialogue, people are kind of going to think then that you're very careful about the scenes that you choose as well. And like, I mean, I read the entire notes section at the back, which is like 40 plus pages of like tiny print. Like, so she gives you a lot of backstory, and it was just weird because there were so many things where she's like, oh, and I made up this scene, and I made up this character, and I made up this scene, and it's like, some of that I think you have to extrapolate and that makes sense, but some of it didn't feel like that, and it just felt weird because I feel like this is, the overall impression you get about this book is that it's mainly historical, like that it's like mostly a biography but with like some fictional aspects. And I don't think that's actually true. Like, I think she changed things or invented things a lot more than the presentation of this book might suggest, you know? And also, speaking of the background, I appreciate that she did such a good job of grounding us in this time period, but I think she maybe did too much of that. Like, it was a lot. It was very dense backstory that I don't think we always needed. I also didn't really like the focus on Artemisia's love life later on, and like, I don't know, like some of this stuff we know happened, like Francesco Mario Maringhi, I think was his name. Like, we know that they had a relationship and we have like letters about that and everything, but there's like some stuff where she just like, it seems like she just made it up. And I just think it's disheartening and weird that for a woman artist who for so long has been defined by the men in her life, that we kind of do that again here, even in cases where that didn't even happen, I think. Like, she invents like basically an entire other child that Artemisia had, that as far as I can tell from other sources I've read, the reason that some people mistakenly think she had one more child than she did is because she sometimes went by her given name and sometimes by a nickname. And so like the author, I don't know if she is aware of that or not, but like the author like used this kid who did not exist as a reason for deciding that Artemisia had an affair with a duke in Spain. And I don't know, it was weird. Like, the focus on her love life was just strange to me. And not that if those things were true, then that she's somehow less of an artist or less sympathetic. That's not what I mean. I just, like I said, I think it's sad that we are once again paying so much more attention to the men in her life than to herself, you know, as a person in her own right. I also, while I like some of the way that Gina Siciliano engaged with the like content and themes of this book, I also think there were other places that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, I don't know, she strikes me a little bit as like a Caravaggio apologist, which I am not a fan of. Like, I like some of his art, but the man was kind of an awful human being, and I feel like that was glossed over a little bit. So I don't know, I feel like some of her, like, I think she's very upfront about the fact that we all have perspectives when we tell stories, which I think is true, and I'm glad she points that out. So I guess it's natural that some of those things will be, I don't know, more understandable or more agreeable than others depending on the reader. But anyway, I did really love a lot of things about this. I think my rating would probably be somewhere between a 3 and 4 stars because there was so much stuff here that was good that I really appreciated. I'm very glad to have read this and to own this, so thank you, Yvette. I just like, I don't know, it fell into some of the traps I feel like that work on Artemisia's life does, or work on women from history in general, as well as things that are maybe more particular to the author. Next, I finished Aint Burned All the Bright by Jason Reynolds, which I think was illustrated by Jason Griffin is his name, who are best friends, and obviously I love Jason Reynolds, but I had never read anything or like seen any of Jason Griffin's work before, so I was glad to read this. This came out I think last year, and this is like a hard book to describe in a way because it's like not a graphic novel, it's like an art piece. So basically Jason Reynolds came up with like a couple of really long like sentences, and then Jason Griffin like created art, like set those phrases to art. It's a little hard to explain, but the book is not complicated. I'm just making it sound complicated. And I'm really glad that I finally read this. I was planning to read it anyway, but my friend Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly was talking about how it's a book that is very, very grounded in the year that it came out or that it was written in. A lot of this was written during 2020, or all of it was. And a lot of it speaks very specifically to that year. And so I'm really glad that I did read it sooner rather than later. And kind of the themes of this book are the idea of breath, and how that relates to like anxiety, how that relates to COVID-19, how that relates to Black people being murdered by police. So like this idea of breath and what it represents and connecting it to these different specific examples. And I thought this was fantastic. It's definitely something that lends itself to reading slowly or to rereading. I thought the art was really, really well done. I think the way it was paired with the writing was great. Like this is such an effective book for being such a like pared down kind of construction. So I'll include some images of the art and what it looks like inside. But I gave Aint Burned All the Bright 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. Next, I finished All the Right Reasons by Bethany Mangle. This is a book I could have used in my reading books where the main character shares my name vlog, because the main character is named Kara, which is exciting. I don't think it's like a new trend in naming characters or anything, but it was fun to come across this. And this is a contemporary book, and I saw this recommended by Utopia State of Mind. I will link her channel down below. And this was a really interesting contemporary book. I'm really glad I read it. So like I said, we're following our main character Kara, and her and her mother, it's her and her mother in her household because her mother and father had a really horrible divorce, and their dad is just making their life really miserable. Yeah, I really, really hate her father. And then Kara ends up getting an opportunity for her and her mother to audition to be on this like reality dating show on like helping single parents find love again. And this is not a spoiler because this is like literally the premise of the book, but her and her mom do end up making it on the show. And that's kind of where the rest of the story goes. They have the opportunity to win a lot of money from this, which is why they really want to do it. They really want to get enough money to like get away from Kara's father and to like have their own like business and to be able to move to a different city and everything. So this is really important for both of them. And yeah, like I was really enjoying this. This was gonna be a 4 stars, but then there was like something about the ending that I'll talk about in a second here. But overall, I did like this. I really liked Kara as the main character. She also ends up spending time with one of the kids of the contestants, like this boy her age, and I really loved him. I really loved the relationship, and I would have loved to see even more time spent on that. But I just really enjoyed that. I also really loved seeing Kara make friends with some of the other kids of the contestants. Like that was really cool. I thought the dating show aspect was really fun and really interesting, and it seems like the author had really thought out exactly how this would all work. I don't watch any of the shows that this is like a reference to, like The Bachelor or anything, so I don't know how accurate it was, but it seems like it was pretty accurate. And I also really like the way the book talks about the like the way that romance interacts with like choice and timing. I just thought that was super interesting, like the way that these characters, like the way that like they're on this dating show and they're being put in specific circumstances to see if they can have romantic feelings, and the way that like that like does that make their feelings less real, you know, like how that works. I just thought that was super interesting. And I did like some of the relationship between Kara and her mother. They're supposed to be very close, although as the book goes on they start disagreeing on which contestants are like would be good winners, basically, like that her mother would be choosing as like a romantic partner and who would be possibly Kara's new stepdad and everything. So the big issue that I had, well, I'll start with the other thing first. One thing I didn't like is the way this book talks about like dieting and doesn't really deal with that. Like the way, like it seems like Kara's mother has kind of an unhealthy relationship with like food and exercise, and I don't like the way she kind of, for one thing, the way that that wasn't really talked about as being a thing, but also the way that she kind of pushes that on her daughter. And it's like she does apologize when she realizes what she's done, but the book never really acknowledges how messed up that is. Like we find out that her mother filled out the food survey for her daughter so that she would get like all like kale chips and like carrot sticks and that kind of thing, instead of like other foods that Kara would like, which I feel like is really messed up, and it's not really treated that way. I do like that the book does not treat Kara's enjoyment of food as something that we're supposed to judge, but it just bothered me that that was an element that was never addressed. And like when Kara called her mom on it, her mom did seem to feel bad and to apologize, and like she wasn't trying to force her daughter to diet, but it was just a weird thing to include and to not deal with. And then the really big thing that made this book a 3.5 instead of a 4 stars for me is an aspect of the way the ending was handled, and I'm gonna be as vague as I can, but this is gonna involve some kind of spoilers for the direction things go. So if you don't want to hear this, I will put a timestamp down below. But basically, there is one of the contestants who Kara really doesn't like, and she has been telling her mother like why she doesn't like him, and her mom just like ignores her. And there's even this like thing said where it's like, well, choosing a romantic partner is a bigger choice than choosing a step parent, because basically it's like, well, if her mom and Kara disagree, then we're supposed to believe that her mom should have the final choice. And it's like, if we're talking about things like I don't know, like minor things, like little behavior things or tastes or interests, like yes, that makes sense. Like somebody choosing a romantic partner is gonna feel like that's gonna be weighted more for them. But this was not like a minor disagreement, like, oh, your kid is annoyed by this one thing that this person does, but you would like them as a partner. This is like your child, who we are told you guys are really close and you really trust each other. Your child is telling you not just that I don't like this person, but like, I don't trust this person. I don't think this is a good idea. Like, this person is like borderline abusive, definitely very controlling, and like this is an unhealthy, like this would be an unhealthy relationship. And I hate how close we got to that happening. Like it really, really bothered me, and the way that like I think the book was trying to show how like it can be hard for people to break out of unhealthy relationships, or like a habit of choosing people you know, who are bad for them. And I get that, but I think it could have been done a lot better, because this just was really not great in my opinion. I really didn't like that. I didn't like how, like I said, how close we got, that like we're supposed to, and also that we're supposed to believe these two characters are so close, but that her mom does not trust her about this really important thing. It looks like she's going to, and then she doesn't. So like it worked out, and I'm really glad it worked out. I just wish we hadn't gotten that close, and that this other thing hadn't been handled the way it was. So that really bothered me. I did really enjoy this book as a whole. I would recommend it if those two things are things that are not going to be like specifically upsetting for you, like that relationship aspect and the dieting or eating thing. But I did enjoy this, and I gave all the right reasons 3.5 stars. Next, I read Powwow Day by Tracy Sorrell, illustrated by Madeline Goodnight, and I am pretty sure I got this book recommended from Ashley at Bookish Realm. I've mentioned her before. Her taste in picture books and everything is fantastic. So this is a picture book about a young girl who is going to her first powwow for a while, and like after she's been sick, and just the way, I don't know how to explain it. It's like the seeing her get to be there and, you know, be part of this, be part of her community in this way. And this was really beautiful. Like, I loved this. I loved the art. I'll insert some pictures of that. I loved the focus on community and on healing, and yeah, this was just really, really wonderful. I gave Powwow Day 5 stars. Definitely recommend it. And it was really special to get to see, to learn more about what a powwow is and how it works and everything. So I'm just very grateful that I got to read this, and this was fantastic. Next, I finished another novella by W.R. Gingell that was 12 Days of Faery. This is the first book in the Shards of a Broken Sword series of companion novellas, so like they're not really connected at all, but this is technically the first in that series, and we are following two main characters, Marcon and Althea, I think is her name. Yes, and so Marcon is the king of this kingdom, obviously, and his son, Prince Perrin, seems to be under a curse where any woman that he commits to romantically, that he gets too close to, ends up having something really terrible happen to her. And this has been happening for a while now, and they're getting really desperate, and they really want to stop this from happening, so they've been having like visiting magic users and everything try and break the curse, and none of them has succeeded. And then this visiting enchantress named Althea shows up, and she says that she thinks she can solve it, that she can figure out what's going on and stop it from happening. And the kind of traditional prize is that she gets to marry the prince, only Althea is actually closer to Marcon's age, and they seem to be getting on a lot better than her and Perrin. And that's kind of what sets up this story. And I really, really enjoyed this. I'm not a big fan of age gap romances usually. Like, it's really rare that I'm sold on them, but I think this one was done really well. I think it helps that the age gap is not like too big, and also that like even the younger party is like in their late 20s, so it's like they're still definitely both adults in the same phase of their life, you know? But I really liked Marcon and Althea as individual characters, and I also really loved their relationship together. I really enjoy W.R. Gingel's writing. I think she does a great job with like humor and dialogue and everything, but also with like world building, and I think her ideas are really interesting. And I appreciate that even though there is a lot of humor in this book, there's also an acknowledgement of the like really dark premise, like some of the awful things that can happen, like because some of these girls are dead, and I feel like Althea and Marcon both like acknowledge that and respond accordingly. I thought the fairy aspects were super interesting. I really liked the way those were used. I really liked seeing Althea and Marcon have to like work on, it was sort of like a mystery together, and I really enjoyed that. There was also, I mean, there like a lot of great scenes with them, but one of them that really stands out is like this really great way to like use consent in a really surprising way. Yeah, I just really enjoyed that. So I really loved this. I gave 12 Days of Faery 4.5 stars. Next, I finished Glass Slippers by Leah Sipes. This is the second book in the Sisters Ever After series, which is a series of companion novels that all follow the sisters of famous fairy tale princesses. And so the first one was a Sleeping Beauty retelling where we follow Sleeping Beauty's sister. And this one obviously is a retelling of Cinderella, where Cinderella actually had 3 stepsisters, not 2. And we are following that third stepsister named Tirza. And unlike her sisters, she is not mean, she was not cruel. So when Cinderella married her prince, she took Tirza to the palace with her. She did not hold her responsible for her family's actions, so the rest of her family were exiled, but Tirza was not. But everyone's always been really uncomfortable and unpleasant about Tirza being here. They all believe that it's only a matter of time before she goes bad like her family did. And at the beginning of the book, Cinderella's glass slippers, like the famous glass slippers, go missing, and Tirza was the last one to try them on. But she didn't take them, and she swears she didn't take them, but of course nobody believes her. And we find out that there may be more at stake here than we thought regarding these glass slippers. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I am continuing to really enjoy this series. I just find these really like engaging and quick to read. I think this is a really, really interesting take on the Cinderella story. I really liked Tirza as a main character. I thought the portrayal of Cinderella was super interesting. Like Cinderella the character, I thought this book has really interesting things to say about like family and if people can change and like judging people and all of that. I think the twists on the fairy tale were interesting, and there were several parts of this book that like I could not figure out which way they were going to go until it happened, which was, I think, really impressive. Overall, I didn't like this one quite as much as Thornwood, which was the first book, but I did still really enjoy this. There were just some aspects of the ending where I liked some of it, but not all of it. And also, I feel like the side characters in this book didn't pull me in as much as in the first one. Like in the first one, I really, really loved our side characters. There were a couple in particular who I really enjoyed, and like a friendship I really liked, and this one we didn't really have that as much. Like we did have some side characters who were interesting, but I just didn't like the side characters in this one as much. But I still really enjoyed this, and I gave Glass Slippers 4 stars. Next, I finished The Lady Jewel Diviner by Rosalie Oakes. This is the first full-length novel in the Lady Diviner mystery series. I read the prequel novella a few months ago now, so this is the first full-length novel, and we are following our main character Eleanor, and this is a historical fantasy set in, I don't remember what era, but it's in England, I think probably around the Regency. Actually, I do know when it was set because this is during the time of the French Revolution, so I do know what era it was in. But we're following our main character Eleanor, and she has the ability to divine jewels, but she doesn't want anyone to know that she has this ability. And at the beginning of the book, she makes the unexpected acquaintance of a tiny spinster vampire lady named I forget what her first name is, but she goes by Miss Zuth for a lot of the book, and the two of them end up becoming friends and working together, and Miss Zuth is able to help Eleanor kind of learn more about her abilities and to use her abilities better, and they end up being like kind of getting wrapped up in a mystery about some jewels that have gone missing. And yeah, I really enjoyed this installment. I did like the prequel novella, but I mentioned how I'm expecting to enjoy the other books more, and so far that is true because I did really enjoy this. I really love Eleanor as a main character, and I really liked Miss Zuth as well. I really loved their friendship that develops, and I also like that even though there is plenty of humor in this book, and like you can tell by the premise that some of it is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, you know, it's like a tiny spinster vampire kind of thing, but I appreciate that it didn't go over the top. Like it never felt annoying or too much, which I appreciate. I also I'm liking Eleanor's brother more than I did before, so that's nice. Also Lord Beresford, who is the love interest for Eleanor, like we met him in the prequel novella, and I was saying how like I wasn't sold on him, and I was like, I think their romance is going to be pretty important in the series, so I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I still wasn't a big fan of him for most of this book. Like, I didn't dislike him. He's a little bossier than I tend to like, but I didn't dislike him. I just didn't really care about him at all. But their ending scene together was really lovely, so that makes me hope that I'm gonna like him more as the books go on. We also get the introduction of some Selkie characters in here. Like, one of them is named Jacques. I assume that's how you say it, even though it's spelled J-A-Q. But I really like him. I think he's really funny and really interesting. And I like the way that the fantasy aspects kind of combine with this like comedy of manners, or like this like proper society kind of thing. Like the fact that Miss Zuth is a tiny vampire lady who can turn into a bat is not nearly as shocking as the fact that when she does this, she is naked. That kind of thing. Aldrida, that is Miss Zuth's name. Yeah, so I'm really enjoying the series. I'm excited to see where it goes. The only thing in this one I wasn't a big fan of is the actual mystery part, the way some of that played out. But overall I had a really good time with this, and I gave the Lady Jewel Diviner 4 stars. Next, I finished The Frostfair Affair by Tansy Rayner Roberts. This is the second novella in the Teacups and Sympathetic Magic? No, Tea and Sympathetic Magic series, which is another kind of loose historical fantasy. This is a lot looser, I think, than the Lady Jewel Diviner's one, because this setting is inspired by Britain, but not nearly as closely. But there is also magic here, and yeah, I really loved the first novella, and I also really loved this one. So we're following our main character Neme, or Nemazine, and after the events of the first novella, she is kind of notorious in polite society, and so she has decided that she's going to use that notoriety to try and push for women to be allowed to travel by portal, because that is a restriction that is on women, is that unlike men, they are not allowed to travel using portal magic, even though it would be really convenient for them to be able to do so. So she's gone to town, which in this story, that is like one of the islands, instead of being like London, which I think is fun. She's gone to town for the season, and she's staying with a friend of hers who has recently gotten married, and she's trying to like push the government to allow women to use portal travel and everything. And she does end up meeting up with the love interest that we met from the first book, so that was really lovely. And yeah, I did really love this one. As you can tell maybe by the title, there is a frost fair that is very important, and they also end up getting caught up in a mystery. I really enjoy these characters. I love the writing and the humor, and the way that the magic is used in this series. Like, I just think it's really clever and interesting, because this is overall a really fun book, but I also like the way that it looks at things like gender and like power dynamics. I also really like the realization from Neme partway through this book that what is a convenience for her, you know, this portal travel, could be a matter of survival, like for working class women, for example. So I thought that was done well. I continue to love these characters. Like I said, I like the romance. Yeah, like my only real like critiques is I think there was a part of the ending that wrapped up too quickly, like just a little too fast. And also there is a conflict between her and her love interest that I think is being handled well. Like, I think it's given the importance that it needs, but I'm a little concerned about how they're actually going to compromise on this, because it seems tricky. So I'll see how that goes in book 3. But I did really enjoy this one, and I get the Frostfair Affair 5 stars. And finally, the last book I'm going to talk about in this part of the wrap-up is another Cinderella retelling, which is funny because I feel like I don't often seek them out, but clearly I can really enjoy some of them. And that is Soot and Slipper by Kate Stradling. Kate Stradling is another indie fantasy author who I felt for a while that I would really enjoy, and I'm really glad that I finally picked up a book by her, because I did really enjoy this. This is a very short retelling of Cinderella, and at the beginning I was liking it well enough. I liked our main character Eugenie, who is the Cinderella character. I liked the writing. She does end up going to the ball. I thought the romance was sweet. It was a little insta-lovey, but you kind of expect that, I feel like, with the Cinderella retelling, even more than some other fairy tale retellings, so I was okay with that. So I was having a pleasant time with this, but then the author took this in a really interesting direction that I don't think I've seen a Cinderella retelling done this way before. And I really loved that. Like, I was so impressed at that, and after that I was like enjoying this book even more. And I was so impressed too at the way that Kate Stradling pulled everything together at the end, like all these different plot threads and like these clever twists on the fairy tale and everything. I just thought that was so smart and so interesting. I also feel like as the romance developed, it was less insta-lovey, so I really liked that. Yeah, I just found like the plot of this one super interesting and clever, and I really enjoyed this, and I'm glad to have my positive feelings about Kate Stradling confirmed. And I gave Soot and Slipper 4 stars. Okay everybody, so those were the next group of books I read in April. Please comment down below and let me know if you have read any of these, what you thought of them, or if you're going to pick them up. And let me know a recent book that you read that sold you on something you don't normally like, because like I said, I'm not usually big on age gap romances, but that one was really good. Also, I read a couple of really good Cinderella retellings, and I feel like that's not a retelling I usually seek out as much as others, so I'd love to hear that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!